So thank you very much for joining me this evening. And we're meeting again after a long time. I guess it was early September, so it's been a few weeks. But I'm happy to be back and I'm happy to continue this. So I'm very happy to be able to offer this service. It's very purifying for me. And if it helps you, then I'll be even more happy. So thank you very much. So we'll begin the class. Narayana namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudirayet. Shrunvatam swakata krishnaha punyashravana kirtanaha hidayanto stiya badrani vidunoti suhritsatam nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. So the introductory verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, it's good to start with, because after a long gap, it's good to somewhat submit ourselves to a process. And what we do see here is that the verses that we chant before the starting of Bhagavatam class are self-explanatory in terms of what the Bhagavatam wants to accomplish. So the first verse is that we are submitting ourselves to the disciplic succession because we want to learn based on Tatwa. We want to be able to learn from those who have realized experiences. Realized experiences are literally being able to witness an incarnation of the Lord, literally being able to actually have darshan of the Lord in different circumstances. And we ought to be able to actually be able to hear from someone who has seen the Lord and seen his pastimes, and then they have recorded such statements. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is a compilation of realizations, and realizations are experiences of Shastra when someone comes in touch with a spiritual phenomenon, then they're experiencing Shastra. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and then Raghunath Das Goswami, they have written so many different poems, and many of these poems, they end with a Falashruti. The Falashruti essentially says that if one were to follow the principles of devotional service, and if there's no other desire in the heart other than wanting to stay in Raja and to practice the process of serving Harinam, serving Mahaprabhu, then the pastimes of the Lord would be revealed. Now, if the acharyas, if the great personalities are writing that if you have no other desires in your heart and you're able to come to Vrindavan and you're able to chant Harinam, then you will witness the pastimes as we have witnessed them. That's what they're saying. So this is basically the meaning of being able to learn through realizations, the idea of being able to learn through the parampara and learn through Tatwa. Tatwa is absolute reality. Krishna says this in 4.9, where he says that you learn about me. And if you learn about me through Tatwa, and you learn that my appearance and my activities are transcendental through Tatwa, which is on an absolute plane, there is no such thing as a relative plane. You don't compare his activities with something else, then you will surely come back to me. So our spiritual masters, they write with great confidence that if you are able to have no desires in your heart and you visit Raja and you're in Raja and you're able to stay here and you have no other desire other than to stay here and serve Harinam, then you will witness the pastimes that occur, because the covering in Vrindavan is very thin. The material covering is very thin. This is not a historical location. This is a location where there is spiritual reality that is existing as of today. Essentially, this is not a historical location where Krishna once was there with his friends. He was once here with Srimati Radharani. The answer is no. There's Nitya Seva, and Krishna is sporting in Vrindavan with his friends and with the associates, eternal associates in Vrindavan, in different capacities based on the mellow that they're attracted to here in Vrindavan, and that reality is existing as of today. So this is not a place of historical importance for us. This is a place where spiritual reality exists, and it is ongoing because this is a piece of the spiritual sky. This is basically the spiritual sky. The material covering is very thin. But then we don't have capacity for us to have complete realization of the spiritual sky. So how do we learn Krishna, about Krishna through Tatwa? How do we learn about it? So we have to come to the parampara. And then the parampara, they have seen the truth. Essentially, they have chanted here, they have dedicated themselves, they have come with hearts with no desire other than wanting to chant Harinam. And they have lived here and they have called upon Harinam and they have witnessed the pastimes and they have recorded their experiences, and then they have established a certain process for us. So we learn through the parampara system, through people who have realized. We hear through them. Essentially, we are reading and hearing, it's one and the same in one sense. The sound vibrations are very important, but reading and hearing, we are hearing the realizations of realized souls, essentially means that we are seeing through their eyes things that we can't see, we don't have capacity to see. So this is very important for us to understand that the Bhagavatam starts with, and we are asked to read these verses before we begin Srimad Bhagavatam class. So the first verse is Shrinvatam Swakata Krishnaha Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Hridiyantaha Stohi Abhadrani. So the word Abhadrani is being used. Bhadra is that which is auspicious. Abhadrani is that which is inauspicious, that which needs to be removed, that which needs to be discarded. And inauspicious in Srimad Bhagavatam and in the calculations of all our preceptors, what is inauspicious is the mode of passion and ignorance. So in reality, Srimad Bhagavatam, by coming in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam, because Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna himself, we are dislodging passion and ignorance from our hearts and establishing pure goodness. And this is being done through realized experiences because there's potency here. Srila Vyasadeva has seen Lord Varaha, he has seen Lord Narasimha, he has seen the Purusha avatars evolve. So Srila Vyasadeva is Narayana himself, and his capacity for realization is absolute. So he has seen and witnessed all these events, and he is recording it. And when we are coming in touch with this, Abhadrani, that which is inauspicious, is just being removed. Now, the next verse, Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu, again repeats itself, saying Abhadreshu. What are we trying to do with Srimad Bhagavatam? We are hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, and the sound vibrations of Srimad Bhagavatam can practically dislodge that which is inauspicious from our hearts. What is inauspicious? Passion and ignorance. Now, when we come across passion and ignorance, it is represented in Srimad Bhagavatam in various incidents. And one such incident is what we read about in chapter 16 and 17 of Canto 3. Of course, it begins with passion and ignorance. So Mother Diti is afflicted. So she has a very deep yearning to unite with her husband. Nothing wrong with it, but at the same time, it is somewhat inauspicious simply because she is completely controlled by the mode of passion and ignorance. And she's approaching him at an inappropriate time. So again, passion and ignorance. He, Kashyapa Muni, when he wants to unite with his wife, because he tries to praise her, he tries to pacify her. And we spoke of this in previous sessions, that praise is equivalent in many ways to, in one sense, it is a very subtle form of gratification. And if praise can be heaped upon someone, it can satisfy lust. So that is basically the attempt being made by Kashyapa Muni, where he's praising Mother Diti. And he's praising her quite extraordinarily, where you see him praising quite unusually. And when you see him praising quite unusually, he's trying to pacify her lustful drive at that point in time so that he could thwart or avoid the unfortunate experience of bringing together or coming together at an unfortunate time, because he knew the consequences he was trying to avoid. So he was praising her so that he could pacify her. It didn't work. So he basically just accepted the circumstances and united with his spouse. And this happened during twilight when Lord Shiva, which is Rudra. In reality, it is not Shiva, it's Lord Rudra. He travels in the sky, and that is basically the time, there is Brahma Gayatri early in the morning, which we call it Brahma Muhurta. So the sunrise is Brahma Gayatri. Then the afternoon is Vishnu Gayatri. Then in the evening, it is called Shiva Gayatri because Lord Shiva appears in the evening around 6 o'clock, the Sandhi, the third Sandhi of the day, junction of the day. And when he appears, it is considered to be a time which is considered to be somewhat, the twilight is considered to be an inauspicious time for anything. It's almost as if there are certain functions that are changing, and there's a change of God in the sky, and then it is inauspicious, and then destructive things can happen due to engagement of activities which are inappropriate during twilight. Now again, this is abhadreshu, right? Nashta prayeshu, abhadreshu. This is abhadrani, abhadreshu. This is exactly what is happening during this particular time between Kashyapa Muni and Mother Diti. It is inauspicious, abhadreshu, because there is only a domination of passion and ignorance. She can't hear her husband's words. She really can't hear because the senses have become so active that she can't really hear the husband's words. And he practically becomes angry because he's being forced into circumstances. His puja is being disturbed. Because the Brahmana, he's supposed to offer Samhita. There is a whole concept of offering fire, making oblations into the fire during the junctions of the day. So the morning, afternoon, evening, the fire is burning. The yajna is a 3-day, 3-time function for the initiated Brahmana, which is even done even now in traditional hamlets. You will find in South India and other places where they will offer sacrificial offerings 3 times a day. Whoever has got the Brahmin thread, they got to do this. So basically, he's coming in touch with the fire. He's getting ready for offering oblations into the fire. And this whole circumstance is stopping him from this particular activity. So this auspicious activity of him being able to purify himself by coming in touch with Krishna through the fire is being interrupted because Diti, Mother Diti, wants to unite. This is Abhadreshu. Now, when there is Abhadreshu, Kashyapa Muni also becomes angry. So there is passion, ignorance, which also is caused by this incident. So there's only passion and ignorance. This is Abhadreshu in that particular incident. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we notice that there is an incident which occurs, which is particularly dominated by Abhadreshu. Yeah, it is not Bhadra, it is Abhadreshu. Yeah, Abhadreshu it's devoid of the mode of goodness. The mode of goodness has been dominated by passion and ignorance. And as a consequence, there are events that occur and which are of great importance and which practically rattle the entire sky. You see, it goes all the way up to the spiritual sky. There are events that occur which practically are of such magnitude because someone of great importance like Kashyapa and Diti, they are engaging in activities which are somewhat of a lower nature in terms of the quality of consciousness. Now, this is Abhadreshu. This Abhadreshu is being brought forth. And when we come in touch with Abhadreshu in Srimad Bhagavatam, it actually removes these qualities from us. It is actually a cure. So when we come in touch with these incidents that occur, which practically lead to the appearance of the Lord, then this Abhadreshu goes away. It's almost as if, for example, we use the word hing. Hing is asafoetida as a spice, is very, very tamasic by nature. It's extraordinarily tamasic, but used in very small quantity in cooking, it has the ability to resolve tamas in the food. So if you add a little bit of hing by itself is very tamasic, but at a very small quantity, it has the ability to neutralize the tamas that is that can be generated in the digestive system, and it allows us to digest food. So in a similar fashion, when you come in touch with incidents such as this, where there are unfortunate circumstances which are dominated by passion and ignorance, and then this practically causes chaos, then Krishna appears. He appears as Narasimhadev, he appears as Lord Varaha. When he appears in these two forms, this is Narayana himself who is appearing. He practically removes the Abhadreshu that is accumulated in our heart, along with all the other Abhadreshus that we hear about in the events that lead to this particular appearance. Yeah. So this is quite fascinating that when you read Srimad Bhagavatam and we come across incidents which are not so wonderful, they have the ability to actually remove the not so wonderful facts from our own head and hearts, cleanse ourselves, because the Lord appears to remove them. So Krishna appears as Narasimhadev, he appears as Varaha after the fact, then everything gets cleansed away. The Krishna practically starts correcting the circumstances and clarifying. So what is being seen here in Srimad Bhagavatam is that you're practically accomplishing the process of removing the influence of the modes of passion and ignorance. It is being done through hearing realized experiences. Realized experiences are experiences of actually witnessing the pastimes of the Lord by the parampara, and then the parampara is passing on their realizations through sound vibration. From one heart to another, these sound vibrations travel and they clear all the abhadreshu, the dust, and then we become free of the affliction of passion and ignorance by coming in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah. So this is basically the objective. Now, in today's session, we spoke a little bit about how Kashyapa Muni and Mother Diti, they united. Kashyapa Muni was agitated. He was very angry because his puja, his process was disturbed. And Mother Diti was overwhelmed with, lust due to the time factor. She was overwhelmed. And this unity practically brought forth demoniac children. So they are coming together at an inauspicious time with poor consciousness. And as a consequence, they are attracting souls who have extraordinary destructive capabilities. So Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu is conceived first. Hiranyaksha is conceived second. These are twins. So Hiranyakashipu, he is conceived first, so he enters into the womb first. But he is the second one to come out of the womb. Hiranyaksha is conceived after the fact. He is the younger brother. But he is conceived after Hiranyakashipu, so he's kind of placed in the womb before him, and he appears first, and then Hiranyakashipu appears after him. But both of these are twins, so there's a sequence that the older twin is conceived first, and the younger twin is conceived. Sorry, the older twin is the one that is conceived first, but then comes last. He does not appear first. So this is basically a circumstance where Lord Narasimha, who annihilates Hiranyakashipu, this Hiranyakashipu appears after Hiranyaksha, and Hiranyaksha basically is the first twin. He is appearing. Now, how does this occur? What is the abhadreshu that occurs in the spiritual sky? Because different abhadreshus, different inauspicious circumstances, different circumstances that are connected to the mode of passion and of equal magnitude, they all have to be connected. It is so fascinating to see that there is an inauspiciousness that is occurring in the home of sage Kashyapa and Mother Diti. It is happening at an inauspicious hour. Their moods are not proper. Kashyapa Muni is agitated, he's angry because he's being prevented from engaging in his, oblations at that particular time, and he is also agitated and angry because his wife doesn't listen. And Mother Diti is overcome by lust, so she is not in a proper time frame, frame of mind. So this particular abhadreshu has to have a parallel connection, and this parallel connection occurs in the spiritual sky in the Vaikunṭha planets, which are connected to the Kshirosagar. So Lord Vishnu, who is managing as a Gunavatar, is in the Kshirosagar. Kshirosagar is Tatastha. The gate entrance of the Kshirosagar is Tatastha, which essentially means that one can come right up to the gate, and that gate is the border between the material and the spiritual sky. And the Lord lies beyond. He is basically beyond. He is not visible. Unless he chooses to appear, one can't really see the Lord in the Kshirosagar. So Hiranyakashipu, Jaya and Vijaya, the two bodyguards, they are basically doorkeepers. Sorry, not bodyguards, doorkeepers. They are at the gate, which is Tatastha, which is dividing the material and the spiritual sky. So in one sense, they are Tatastha, like a jiva. They are Vaikunta doorkeepers. There's no doubt. They are transcendental beings. They have rupas and forms, just like Lord Vishnu, with 4 arms and extraordinarily beautiful countenance and all kinds of wonderful qualities. So they have beautiful bodies, so on. But then they are tatastha. They are right at the border of the Vaikunta and the material sky. You see, they're just right at the border. And because they are so, they have the ability to come in touch with material nature. So they have the ability to be afflicted by the mode of passion and ignorance. Not overwhelmed, they can come in touch. They are not overwhelmed, but they can come in touch. There's potential, or one may say that there is scope in this particular situation. So as a consequence, what do we see here? You practically see a circumstance where Diti and Kashyapa are in a situation which one can term as inauspicious, abhadreshu. Then you have the doorkeepers in Vaikunta, Jaya and Vijaya, in circumstances that are somewhat similar. And they are basically agitated when they see the four different sages, the Kumaras, they enter. And then when they're entering, they're basically, they're agitated by their presence because they're just entering from one gate to another. They're reaching the gate of Vaikunta. So they're very agitated by seeing them. This agitation practically is a material quality because this duality is not present in Vaikunta. I was hearing a class by someone, not of our parampara. This is from the Sri Sampradaya, but he's a very accomplished personality who passed away. He's like an acharya, a great Narasimha Bhakta. And he was basically giving a class, and he was talking about the nature of Vaikunta is that it is predominated by the internal potency of the Lord. The internal potency of the Lord is Mother Lakshmi. So Mahalakshmi, the Vaikunta planets are predominated by her quality because she basically is the internal potency. And the quality is described wonderfully by an incident. He was basically giving an example of how Indra, when he is sitting on top of Airavata, his elephant, and as he is traveling down with the Airavata, sage Durvasa Muni is empowered by Lord Shiva's potency, where the anger that he carries is just intense. Yeah, the potency that he basically has the ability to stop things just right away. His anger is just quite intense. So he basically was awarded a garland which was worn by the goddess of fortune. So Durvasa Muni was carrying a garland that was worn by the goddess of fortune. So he was having it in his hand. And as he was having this Mahaprasad in his hand of the garland, which was worn by the goddess of fortune, and as he was searching for a befitting personality whom he could award this wonderful gift, he saw Indra coming on this elephant, the king of heavens. And as he was coming on the elephant Airavata, Indra couldn't see who it was who was trying to offer him a garland. If he had seen it was Durvasa, he would have gotten down from the elephant, he would have paid obeisances, and he would have accepted, because he knew that if he ever does anything, even to the slightest level, he wouldn't want to provoke the sage. But Indra couldn't see who it was. So he was there up there. So in one sense, you can say that when the time factor is not on your side, essentially, you're not protected. When you're not protected, then the ability to commit offenses is very high. So oftentimes, as even devotees, when we lose protection, that is when we start becoming offensive. So it is not so much that Krishna is protecting us. Krishna has somehow or the other, something has happened where we don't have any protection anymore. We don't have any immunity. And as a consequence, we start getting infected by material energy. When we start getting infected by material energy, we start making mistakes and we start committing offenses. So Lord Indra, even though he is the king of heavens, oftentimes he puts himself in circumstances where something would have happened prior, which practically has removed his ability to protect himself. So as a consequence, he, at that point in time, could not see that it was Durvasa Muni who was trying to offer him the garland. So what he did was he practically lowered the instrument. This is Ankusha. Ankusha is this curved metal hook which they use to control the elephant. They're supposed to prod the elephant behind the ear to make the elephant turn. The elephant is an enormous animal. And the mahout, the fellow who sits on top of the elephant, he has to use some kind of an instrument to control this elephant, and that is called ankusha. He practically can pierce the elephant in certain sensitive spots and then make the elephant respond. So he had this particular ankusha, and he lowered the ankusha like a hook, and then he collected the garland from Durvasa Muni. And then the garland, when it was being collected, Durvasa Muni was highly offended, and he became extraordinarily angry that Indra could actually lower a metal hook to collect the garland. He couldn't come down. He was extremely angry. But what is it that prevented Durvasa Muni from cursing Indra at that point in time is the fact that he was actually holding a garland which was worn by the goddess of fortune, because she is the internal potency and she is filled with mercy. The mercy potency of the Lord is Srimati Radharani. The goddess of fortune is an expansion of Srimati Radharani. As a consequence, when he is holding this garland, which is worn by Mother Lakshmi, he does not have the ability to curse. He is able to forgive Durvasa Muni. The moment the garland is handed over to Indra in the Ankusha, his anger explodes. And at that point in time, the next offense that is committed by Indra, which is to practically keep the garland, disregard the garland, the elephant tramples the garland, and then everything is over. That time, Durvasa Muni can't control himself because the garland is out of his hand. The internal potency of the Lord, the protection is gone, which is Mother Lakshmi's merciful protection, which is in her garland. The potency was such that he was holding the garland, and that garland practically did not allow him to curse Indra when he lowered the Ankusha to offend him in the first time. It's quite fascinating to see that the mercy potency of the Lord. So this particular domination of mercy potency in Vaikunṭha is there. And when someone commits an offense, then it practically weakens the person's immune system to such an extent that they become prone to more offenses, and then they basically commit more serious offenses and get into trouble. So Jaya and Vijaya were agitated, and they were not dominated by the extraordinary potency of Mother Lakshmi. It is said in Srimad Bhagavatam that she was offended because they stopped her inadvertently from entering, on trying to prevent her from going back to her service because the Lord was resting. The Srimad Bhagavatam doesn't elaborate on this story. The next week when we talk about it, we will elaborate on it. But the point is that Mother Lakshmi was stopped by Jaya and Vijaya. And as a consequence, they did not have the protection of the internal potency of the Lord at that point in time. They practically were agitated, and they became subject to influence by the material mode of nature. And they become agitated with passion and ignorance at that point in time. So the sages noticed this particular affliction, and they practically start cursing. So now they were also in that particular circumstance where they start cursing. And the curse of Vaishnavas and Brahmanas is generally extraordinarily auspicious. The sages are cursing Jaya and Vijaya. It results and becomes a part of Leela for the Lord. It facilitates Leela. There is Narasimha Leela, there is Varahadev's Leela. There are so many different pastimes. So many different wonderful devotees have come out from these Leelas. They have exhibited their wonderful. So many wonderful devotees have come out. Hare Krishna, can everybody mute yourself, please?
Low heat, very low heat.
I just didn't put it up.
Hare Krishna.
No, you put on the high.
Yeah.
Kindly mute yourself. Okay, thank you. Anyways, so the mercy potency of the Lord has walked away. So as a consequence, they are not able to control themselves. The sages themselves, when they curse, Vaishnava sages, this doesn't happen with every sage. These sages are not meant to curse. They are not supposed to curse. They are not meant to basically curse, because this is considered to be more of ignorance. If the guru curses the disciple to fall down, or if the guru curses the disciple to have trouble, this is the mode of ignorance. It is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam that this is not considered to be auspicious. The guru is not supposed to push the disciple down to such levels. However, the Vaishnava sages, you have Sri Narad Muni cursing Nala Kuvera and Manigriva, the sons of Kubera. the wonderful Damodar Leela, where they become trees, and then they have this extraordinary experience that they practically become a part of eternal Leela of Lord Damodar, which is the most wonderful Leela, because this is practically an attribute of the Lord which distinguishes him from even Narayan. This childhood pastime of Damodar distinguishes Krishna from Narayan. So this is super special. It's extraordinarily sweet. Yeah. This particular pastime, when Narad Muni is cursing Manigriva and Nalakuvera, he's practically putting them in a circumstance where they become a part of eternal Leela. So is the circumstance with the sages, the Kumaras, and Jaya and Vijaya. When they're cursing them, they're becoming a part of Leela. So this is the Vaishnava Kripa, because their hearts are filled with mercy and they carry the potency of the internal potency of the Lord, which is Srimati Radharani's potency, basically. Yeah, this is Mother Lakshmi's potency, because it's Vaikunta planet, she dominates Mahalakshmi. So this is her potency, where the devotees basically have her lotus feet, her blessings in their heart, and as a consequence, they are able to execute whatever they say, and it results in mercy, because this is the quality of the mother. You see, she, like Mother Radharani, Lord Gauranga's mercy is experienced because he's carrying the mercy and he's carrying the mood of Srimati Radharani. This is extraordinary. Lord Gauranga, he carries the mood of Srimati Radharani, and he places his entire compassion on Lord Nityananda. And this compassion is so intense that Lord Nityananda becomes insane. He becomes mad. Yeah, in a good way, in a very good way, which is Divya Mada. He becomes transcendentally mad. He becomes transcendentally, extraordinarily mad. And he starts basically distributing the same prema with absolutely no qualification, no rules, nothing at all, no discrimination. He just distributes it. Just even if there's a little bit of faith, he is practically giving this prema. Now, in a similar fashion, Jaya and Vijaya, they are dominated by Mother Lakshmi's mercy. She is the internal potency of the Lord in the Vaikunta planets. She is mercy personified. The mother's quality is mercy, nurturing mercy. And she practically provides this mercy. They offend her by stopping her from going back to the Lord. So this is all a part of big Leela. One can say that this is a very convoluted, very long drawn, big Leela of the Lord. So the script is extraordinarily complicated. Something is happening in the spiritual sky. Jaya and Vijaya. This is Abhadreshu because there's a domination of passion and ignorance. Then there's Abhadreshu when Kashyapa Muni and Diti want to unite in the evening at an inauspicious time. So these two particular events that are considered to be of the quality of mode of passion and ignorance, they are being matched. And now you have Jaya and Vijaya entering into the womb of Mother Diti because they are being cursed. And then Mother Diti is supposed to conceive. And now you have a combination from the spiritual sky right onto the lower planetary system. The terror which is coming forth, the terror that comes forth from Mother Diti's womb has the demigods bewildered, and she is so powerful, she holds back the pregnancy for hundreds of years. She does not want to release the pregnancy. She is holding it back. Yeah, she is practically not wanting to release the pregnancy. She does not want to release the children out because she knew that these children would cause harm to the Brahmanas. They would cause harm to the sages. So she is holding back. But then eventually, while she's holding back, the potency is such that it is causing all kinds of phenomenal atmospheric disturbances. And these atmospheric disturbances basically cause the demigods to run to Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma practically explains the entire occurrence of Leela to the demigods, which is what chapter 16 was, chapter 15 and 16. Now, what we need to understand is that demoniac presence can cause inauspicious phenomenon and omens to occur on the planet. So there are all kinds of terrible circumstances such as unnatural events, unnatural deaths, mass, I would say circumstances of people dying. We have literally witnessing it for the last 2 years. This is just very unusual for a pandemic of this proportion, very unusual. And this is basically highly inauspicious. But then these are very commonplace in recent years. You have a tsunami, you have earthquakes, you have, for example, this kind of a pandemic and so on. And then you have a great financial crisis, which affects the world. And this is all very commonplace these days. But in those days, these were considered to be highly, highly rare, very rare circumstances. So there's a little bit of, I would say, rarity, and there's a lot of, I would say, surprise being generated in the demigods' hearts. There's fear. Fear is palpable. When demoniac presence is felt, fear becomes quite palpable. Essentially, people can feel fear. Fear takes on certain forms. They're able to feel fear in their hearts. When demoniac presence is more profound. When demoniac presence is profound, then there's great fear. It's basically the quality of fear comes from demons. It's basically how they generate fear, because they operate with the mode of ignorance. So they basically generate an enormous amount of fear. And in today's population, it's extraordinarily commonplace for people to be anxious, to be afraid, to have all kinds of fear, phobias. It's so commonplace. But then those days, this was all studied as a very rare occurrence. This was almost an extraordinarily rare occurrence, because in this yuga, this is the quality of time. The quality of time in the present yuga is such that there will be complexity. But the previous yugas, it was predominated by the mode of goodness. There's the Srimad Bhagavatam lists so many occurrences of demigods and human beings interacting. When they offer oblations into the fire, you find the demigods appearing. That is the previous yuga, because the atmosphere on the planet was equivalent to the spiritual sky. It was equivalent to higher planetary systems. As a consequence, they could come down. Yeah, the higher planetary systems, when we use the word higher planetary systems, we are not referring to Svarga. So there's a layer, which is the atmospheric layer right above us. The atmospheric layer, and above the atmospheric layer is Svarga. There is a region between Svarga, which is the heavenly planets where Indra and the demigods sit, and the earth, the atmosphere of the earth. There's one particular region that is basically dominated by very violent beings. It's basically demoniac beings dominate that particular region. So in general, I've mentioned this before, when we offer prayers to Lord Ganesh, in the Vedic samskaras, when Vedic havans and yagyas are done, they invoke the presence of Lord Ganesh. The whole idea of invoking his presence is to drive away these demoniac entities who can enter into our atmosphere from the region that is between us and the heavens. So there's a region, and these are very violent personalities. So they come in and they cause disturbance. They are the ones who cause, multiple accidents, very gory stuff. They basically have the ability to cause diversion and cause all kinds of disturbances on the planet. Yeah. So this is why the driver of obstacles is Lord Ganesh in Vedic theology. In the Vaishnava Siddhanta, we offer prayers to Lord Narasimhadev, not so much for the protection from demons. He does it through the demigods. Yeah. The demigods, if they know that we are connected to the mission of Lord Chaitanya, if demigods will be aware that your chanting of the holy name will practically establish a link between you, Krishna, and in between the demigods will start observing, they will make our lives easy. So protection for us is guaranteed simply because of the fact that we are aligning ourselves with the Yuga Dharma. Yeah, we are aligning ourselves with the Yuga Dharma. So protection for us is guaranteed. So the demigods go to great lengths to make things easy for us. So it's unbelievable as to how much cooperation there is between the servants of Krishna and the devotees, because we are aligned with the mission of the Lord. Every demigod knows that the mission of the Lord is to chant Harinam. Everybody knows. Everybody knows, and then they support the Harinam movement. They support this particular movement wonderfully as per the instructions of the Lord. The devotees are supported. So for us, the point I'm trying to make here is that we are protected. So we are not coming in touch with Lord Narasimha for the sake of protection from entities. We are coming to him very specifically so that he could practically destroy the obstacles that are in front of us and Harinam, just as he removed the obstacles for Sri Prahalad. Yeah, a wonderful servant of, Prahalad Maharaj was such an amazing servant for Lord Narasimha. And all this Leela began with these incidents. There is an inauspicious incident on earth between Mother Aditi and Kashyapa Muni. There is an inauspicious incident that occurs in the sky. In both cases, it's passion ignorance. Essentially, Krishna, when he appears after the cursing of Jaya and Vijaya, he makes a statement saying, they have forgotten me. They have forgotten me. So we need to remember this as devotees, because we interact with each other in the temple environment. We interact outside. Abhadreshu and our lack of protection begins. It begins when we commit offenses and we lose immunity. So we don't have any immunity. And once we don't have any immunity, then everything else becomes very difficult for us. So we need to ensure that we don't commit offenses. So that's the most important thing. So here, it's very particular. Krishna is making a statement saying, if someone is working for me, they're representing me and they're committing offenses, then naturally, it is as if I'm committing offenses. Krishna is practically taking on the blame on himself. Vishnu, Lord Vishnu is practically taking the blame on himself. He's saying, if someone working for me is committing an offense, then I'm responsible. It is as good as my committing an offense, so I'm asking forgiveness of you. And then it is being reminded that the Vaishnava sages, when they curse, it's all auspicious. When even they don't know why they cursed. Jaya and Vijaya were bewildered. They didn't know why they stopped the sages. Then it appears that it is all an ultimate part of being in a Leela. So this is very, very auspicious and very, very important service rendered by Jaya and Vijaya, where they subject themselves to circumstances that are extraordinarily difficult for a devotee to become inimical to Krishna. So for 3 lifetimes, they become intensely inimical. Yeah, Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam, right? Anukulyena means being favorably, we are able to follow in the footsteps of those who serve Krishna. Pratikul is unfavorable, but yet being in touch with Krishna. This is also yoga. Yoga of being favorable and following in the footsteps of Srimati Radharani and wanting to serve Krishna. That is recommended in our line. That is basically the purpose of our line. Pratikul is where we become unfavorable, and then we are basically in yoga. So these 2 personalities were in yoga with the Lord, but they were pratikul, they were highly unfavorable. But the intensity of their concentration was equivalent to the intensity of concentration whilst they were personally serving the Lord in Vaikunta. These are Vaikunta people. So they are intensely attached to the Lord. The opposite of the intense attachment was this intense hatred they displayed when they become demons. So Ravana and Kumbhakarna, very powerful. It is said that when spirits attack a person, one of the most difficult spirits to ever overcome is the Brahma Rakshas. Brahma Rakshas is a type of spirit, and that spirit is basically a Brahmana who has had an unnatural death, or a Brahmana who has been killed in certain ways, and he becomes and takes on a ghostly countenance. It's very, very difficult to remove. Very difficult to remove, very difficult to handle, because this particular spirit who has taken on the particular countenance is a Brahmana. He has already done rituals, he has accumulated credits, he has accumulated all kinds of things. So he's very powerful. So in a similar fashion, this Jaya and Vijaya, who are super powerful because they are Vaikunta people, when they become demons, they become extraordinarily powerful that nobody can touch them. Nobody. Because they are Vaikunta. They are Vaikunta, as Srila Prabhupada used the word, they are Vaikunta men. They are basically Vaikuntavasis. They are Vaikunta doorkeepers. They are not ordinary people. So they are basically superior to the power of even the demigods. Nobody, the demigods can't handle those from the Vaikunta planets, the Vishnu Dutas. They cannot handle them because they are extraordinarily powerful. They have attributes which are almost similar to the Lord. There's so much power. So now they come as demons. And there's constant yoga between Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha and the Lord. There's great hatred. The hatred practically makes them meditate on the Lord. They are in yoga. In a similar fashion, you had Ravana and Kumbhakarna. you had Shishupal and Dantavakra. These are personalities who meditated with great intensity, and they practically were annihilated. So Lord Rama, Lord Krishna, obviously Krishna is the avatari, he is the origin. Lord Rama, Lord Varaha, Lord Narasimha, they are Sampurna Narayana Rupa. They are basically Lord Narayana himself. The other expansions of the Lord are Vishnu forms. This is basically the Gunavataras. In one sense, there is no difference between the Gunavatara Vishnu and Lord Narayana, who is the origin of all avatars. Narayana is the Aishwarya Rupi Krishna. He is the Aishwarya Rupi Krishna who is in the Vaikunta. He is the Lord of Vaikunta planets. Now, Lord Ram, Lord Narasimha, Lord Varaha, they're all in the same platform with Narayana. There is no difference, which means these three personalities are Aishwarya Rupi, I would say, representations of Krishna. As Krishna is basically Madhurya Rup, he is basically overwhelmed with sweetness in Braja, so he's displaying pastimes of sweetness. But Lord Ram, Lord Narasimha, Lord Varaha, they are Narayana forms, and they are filled with opulence. They're displaying power which is unparalleled, and they are on the same level as Lord Narayana. They are Narayan, and Lord Narayan is the same as Krishna, except that he is Aishwarya Rupa. He is displaying opulence, Krishna is displaying sweetness. So this is the difference. So it's a very, very important sequence for us to understand that Jaya and Vijaya practically came to terms as demons with Narayana himself, with Krishna himself, as Lord Ram, Krishna, Varahadev, Narasimhadev. These are four personalities on the same level. They come in touch with them. They come in touch with them and they get annihilated by them again and again and again. Yeah. So this is quite fascinating to see how events in the material world have a consequence, and they become receptacles of something that occurs in the spiritual sky. So if Kashyapa Muni and Diti had not decided to unite at an inauspicious hour, then they would have avoided becoming parents of Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. They would have avoided that completely. Yeah. Now, Kashyapa Muni is the father of Vamanadev because he appears as a son to Aditi, the mother of the Devas. So Kashyapa Muni is the father of Vamana. He's also the father of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. The mother is different. Diti, Aditi. It's quite fascinating to see that the same father brings forth the Lord as a son, and then he also brings forth these demoniac personalities who practically are meditating on the Lord, but they're doing so. Now, when Lord Narasimha appears, he practically engages with Hiranyakashipu, tears him asunder. He practically engages with him because he is a devotee. In no other circumstance do you ever find the Lord occupying the throne of the demon he kills. Hiranyakashipu is the one singular person whom the Lord annihilated, and he occupied the throne. Almost as if he was readying the throne. It became his. He becomes the father of Prahlad. He is then giving the throne to Prahlad. So he kills the father, so he becomes the father. See, he doesn't want Prahlad Maharaj to feel the vacuum. So he practically takes on the role of a father. And that is the mood of Lord Narasimha. Lord Narasimha and his consort, when we say Lakshmi Narasimha, the mood of Sri Lakshmi Narasimha is to literally look upon devotees as their children. So they're extraordinarily benevolent, very benevolent, and extraordinarily protective, just as much as parents would protect a child. And they're protective in different levels and extraordinarily benevolent. So this is the same way in which he was looking at Prahlad Maharaj. He was practically wanting to become a parent. He was basically wanting to say that I have killed your father, so it's my duty to become your father. So now on one count, this extraordinary pastime has this very poor start. The poor start is the Abhadreshu, the passion ignorance. This entire passion ignorance occurring both in Kashyapa and Aditi's union, and the passion ignorance that is occurring in the spiritual sky with Jaya and Vijaya being cursed because the Kumaras exhibit anger. Their anger finds a receptacle in Jaya and Vijaya. Jaya and Vijaya exhibit poor behavior, and then they fall down. All of these finally are resulting in the appearance of Krishna as Narasimha and as Sri Varaha. This time, last month, I was in Ahobilam, and as we were climbing up Ahobilam, one of the Navanarsimhas, the Navanarsimha Kshetra, basically the 9 Narasimhadevs, and one of the Narasimhadevs is Varaha Narasimha. The priest was explaining to us, the Sri Vaishnava priests in Ahobilam, they are completely dedicated to this service. And it was one of the most amazing, wonderful experiences overall, because they perform their rituals and everything really wonderfully. It was just wonderful. It was an amazing experience. Anyway, the point is that he was explaining that Lord Varaha and Lord Narasimha are the same. There's no difference. You see, because they appear to kill the twins, they are the same. Varaha Narasimha. So that's why you have Varaha Narasimha. He's called Krodha Narasimha. Krodha Narasimha. Krodha is practically he who penetrates the earth, and then he is practically going down and he's bringing up Mother Bhumi. So they are practically saying that the link between Lord Varaha and Lord Narasimha is being displayed by Krodha Narasimha, one of the Navanarsimhas in Ahobilam. So it's one of the most wonderful experiences. So I was just wanting to say that the Abhadreshu that is caused by our own coming in touch with matter over millions of lifetimes is being removed by coming in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find instances of Abhadreshu. That Abhadreshu is being removed by the Lord's appearance. And as he appears to remove that Abhadreshu, he removes all our disturbances as well. So we practically are getting cleansed by just coming in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam. Even though we appear to see things where one may say that this was an inauspicious circumstance of Jaya and Vijaya being cursed, inauspicious circumstance of Kashyapa uniting with Diti in the evening, these are all mode of passion and ignorance. The Lord cleanses by his appearance. He comes and he completely destroys that passion and ignorance. He establishes himself in the hearts of the devotees of Prahlad Maharaj. That's a wonderful glorification. So once that happens, he also establishes himself in our heart, and we are able to basically experience him. So I just want to read through these verses. It was my remembrance that I did chapter 16, but I'm just going to go through the verses, and then we can do chapter 17 as well. But chapter 17 is basically the inauspicious circumstances of Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. Hiranyaksha, basically. Yeah. So chapter 16, I think I'll just go over chapter 16 very quickly. I'll just read the verses, just the translations, and then we'll take some questions. Next week, we can do chapter 17. One moment. Chapter 16 is 2 doorkeepers of Vaikunta, Jaya and Vijaya, cursed by the sages. Lord Brahma said, after thus congratulating the sages for the nice words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose abode is in the kingdom of God, spoke as follows. Text 2. The Personality of Godhead said, these attendants of mine, Jaya and Vijaya, by name, have committed a great offense against you because of ignoring me. So it appears that when we commit offenses towards devotees, we are ignoring Krishna. This is basically the purport. When you ignore Krishna, then you also end up ignoring the devotees. Yeah, it is basically so. So when we ignore Krishna, we ignore devotees. When we ignore the devotees, we are ignoring Krishna, as vice versa. O great sages, I approve of the punishment that you have devoted to me, to that you who are devoted to me have meted out to them. To me, the Brahmana is the highest and most beloved personality. The disrespect shown by my attendants has actually been displayed by me because the doormen are my servitors. So one of the things that we need to remember when we are serving in a temple, the temple is the home of the Lord. It is not our home. It is the home of the Lord. And as a consequence, we are practically to act as doorkeepers. We are supposed to be servants who are maintaining that home. So whoever walks into the temple, regardless of how wonderful we feel about them or not so much, they are being invited by the Lord. They are basically guests of the Lord. So if we don't treat those who walk into our temples properly, then we are literally putting out behavior which is somewhat disappointing and equivalent to what is being done here by Jaya and Vijaya. Yeah? The temple is not our home, which essentially means that when Krishna is in our home, he is a guest. When we establish Krishna in a temple, that is his home, and then the rules are very different. There he expects us to treat everybody in a different way. Here, when he is in our home, he becomes extraordinarily, I would say, adjusting. He starts adjusting just as much as any guest would adjust to themselves. They would adjust their demeanor, they would adjust their demands because they are actually visiting. Krishna makes some adjustments. He says, okay, I'm ready to compromise on this, that, and the other, but not so much in the temple. So the temple environment is very different. In the temple environment, we are in his home. He is bringing people in. These are his guests. To me, the Brahmana is the highest and most beloved personality. The disrespect shown by my attendants has actually been displayed by me because the doormen are my servitors. I take this to be an offense by myself. Therefore, I seek your forgiveness for the incident that has arisen. A wrong act committed by a servant leads people in general to blame his master, just as a spot of white leprosy on any part of the body pollutes all of the skin. Anyone in the entire world, even down to the Chandala who lives by cooking and eating the flesh of the dog, is immediately purified if he takes bath in hearing to the ear of glorification of my name, fame, etc. Now you realize me without doubt. Therefore, I will not hesitate to lop off my own arm if its conduct is found hostile to you. The Lord continued, because I am the servitor of my devotees, my lotus feet have become so sacred that they immediately wipe out all sin, and I have acquired such a disposition that the goddess of fortune does not leave me, even though I have no attachment for her. And others praise her beauty and observe sacred vows to secure from her even a slight favor. Because I am the servitor of my devotees, my lotus feet have become so sacred. It's fascinating because he is a servitor. He considers himself a servitor, which is why Bhava Bhakti is so rare. Bhakti starts in Bhava, because in Bhava, loving emotions arise in the heart and there's complete surrender. There's love, and as a consequence, there is complete surrender. Without love, there cannot be any surrender. So because there is surrender and there is love, service is good in Bhava. All kinds of bhakti, which is service, begins in Bhava, in reality. So in that particular circumstance, it is so rare. The reason why Bhava Bhakti is so rare, and it is explained by our acharyas as being extraordinarily rare, is because of the fact that Krishna becomes subservient to the Bhava Bhakta. To the pure devotee, Krishna becomes subservient. So now that is a position of Krishna. He practically gives himself. He becomes subservient. And which is what he is explaining here. He is saying, because I am the servitor of my devotees, my lotus feet have become so sacred. He's saying he is being purified because he is the servitor of the Vaishnavas. In a similar fashion, in Canto 6, Bhagirath, he wants to basically bring Mother Ganga down. And Mother Ganga is questioning him, saying, if I come down to the earthly planet, all kinds of sinful people will dip into my waters, and then my waters would become polluted. She is the water that has washed the lotus feet of the Lord. She's completely transcendental. In reality, it's just amazing. A few drops of Gangaji can go a very long way in practically purifying one. However, she has a fear that materialistic people would dump all the reactions in her when they have a dip, because they come with the consciousness of resolving issues, and then they're going to take a dip, and then she will become polluted. Bhagirath, which is basically the personality who brings her down. She's called Bhagirathi because he brings her down. He explains to her that you should not worry. It is actually Lord Brahma who explains to her that you should not worry because there will be Vaishnavas who will be having a bath. The saintly personalities who also would be taking a dip in your waters. The dip of the Vaishnava would counteract millions of sinful reactions of those who are materialists. And as a consequence, there will be neutrality. You don't have to worry. So having a bath in the Ganga in places such as Mayapur is perhaps extraordinarily potent because Mayapur is dominated by Vaishnavas. They are practically the chanters of Nam. They're chanting Harinam and they're taking a dip. They're completely conscious of Nam. And then as a consequence, you will find that the entire, what I would call as our purpose of having a dip to become purified becomes doubly rewarded because of Mother Ganga and also because the Vaishnavas have had a dip. In a similar fashion, here Krishna says, he is purified, his lotus feet is purified because he's serving the Vaishnavas. Quite fascinating. I do not enjoy the oblations offered by the sacrificers in the sacrificial fire, which is one of my own mouths, with the same relish as I do the delicacies overflowing with ghee, which are offered to the mouth of the Brahmanas, who have dedicated to me the results of their activities and who are ever satisfied with my prasad. This cannot be a greater truth than anything else. In the Vaishnava line, when we want to purify our connection, essentially millions and millions and millions of connections are pre-existing because we have so many ancestors. And even if one of the ancestors in the past was a sinful fellow, the succeeding ancestors should have had the capacity to overcome such sin. If one of them was sinful by propensity, the succeeding ancestors should have had the capacity to overcome that sin. Otherwise, it gets passed on from one generation to another, one generation to another, one generation to another. That is why we talk about this whole Pitri Shapa, Pitri Dosh, where this dosha, which is basically a defect, is being caused by sinful people who have existed in the ancestry, and those sins have not been overcome, and they start operating at a very subtle level. And then even though one may generally not be motivated to act in a wrong way, the subtle influence from the past can actually superimpose themselves to such an extent that one may be propelled towards sin. So this has to be cleansed, and which is the whole purpose of offering the waters, the tarpana, which is being offered every month, every new moon day, the Vedic ritual of offering water to the ancestors. What is the purpose of offering water to the ancestors? Chanting mantras and offering water, one cleanses the influence of these sinful people who have existed in our own family line, who are influencing us. Their influences are being diluted, they're being removed. Yeah. Now, then again, you have these yearly observances of funeral ceremonies, not funeral ceremonies, yearly observances of situations which are, Shraddha, as we call it in Sanskrit, where an annual ceremony is being done to appease those who have passed on. This is also the same purpose, is to remove the influence of these personalities who practically can impose themselves on us. The Vaishnava way of doing this is extraordinary, and it ties in with this verse. The Vaishnava way of removing influences from the past is to feed Vaishnavas. Offer Krishna opulent, wonderful bhoga, which means you prepare a wonderful feast, and then you feed Vaishnavas, feed the Brahmanas. In Vrindavan, that is very normally done, where there are so many wonderful temples where the standards of worship are extraordinarily strict. They're very traditional. Then one sponsors a feast, and it's quite nominal. By Western standards, it's quite nominal. You could feed someone for as low as 2 to 3 euros. 2 to 3 euros, you could feed a person. As a consequence, it's quite nominal. Feeding 100 people would be a 250 to 300 euro project, which is done once a year. But then the point is that it is extraordinary in its ability to fix issues, because it is practically being supported by Krishna's own words from Shastra, where he says that I will be satisfied if my devotees are fed delicacies that have been offered. So when a feast is being sponsored, and then we basically do it in remembrance of ancestors, in remembrance of the family line, so on, then there are blessings that come which practically have the ability to resolve issues so that we don't get influenced by these personalities who have existed. Yeah. So this is a very, very elaborate system in Vedic culture of offering water every month during the new moon, then offering, the annual ceremonies, etc. In the Vaishnava line, we offer bhoga to Krishna and we feed the Vaishnavas. And then if it is done properly with prayers and so on, it has a wonderful effect. It has a wonderful effect, which is what Krishna is referring to here. So it's very powerful because it is being supported by Krishna's own words from Srimad Bhagavatam. And it is easy to do. It's very powerful. Everybody knows the power of prasadam. So it's easy to do. If it is offered very nicely, if it's prepared with great care, it has the ability to practically give bhakti and to practically resolve issues for others. I am the master of my unobstructed internal energy, and the water of the Ganges is the remnant left after my feet are washed. That water sanctifies the three worlds along with Lord Shiva, who bears it on his head. If I can take the dust of the feet of Vaishnavas on my head, who will refuse to do the same? So here Krishna is explaining further that the water of Gangaji is the water that washes my feet. It is being accepted by Lord Shiva. This great personality of Lord Shiva, he is the supreme Vaishnava. He is Vaishnavana Meta Shambhuhu. He is the greatest of Vaishnavas, most merciful. His behavior and his proximity to Krishna is unparalleled. He is an incarnation of Krishna. He is practically the glance. He is very closely associated with Lord Narasimha. Yeah, all the Narasimha Padati, all the Sudarshana Narasimha prayers, mantras, everything has come from Lord Shiva. He is the one, he is the greatest devotee of Lord Narasimha, which essentially means that he is practically, completely surrendered to Lord Narasimha to such an extent. So as a consequence, what we are trying to say here is that Lord Shiva takes on the water of Gangaji on his head. And this water has washed the lotus feet of Krishna. And now Krishna is saying that my feet are sacred because I'm serving my devotees. So he's saying that if I can take the dust of the feet of Vaishnavas, then who will hesitate to do so? Because Lord Shiva is taking the dust of Lord Krishna's feet. So if Krishna himself is going to take the Vaishnavas' mercy, then what would stop others from doing so? It's quite powerful. The Brahmanas, the cows, and the defenseless creatures are my own body. Those whose faculty of judgment has been impaired by their own sin look upon these as distinct from me. They are like furious serpents, and they're angrily torn apart by the bills of the vulture-like messengers of Yamaraj, the superintendent of sinful persons. The Brahmanas, cows, and the defenseless creatures. Brahmanas, women, children, old men. Brahmanas and cows, very specifically. And two of our epics, both Mahabharata and Ramayana, they have their origin in, or rather the wars began because of insults to women. You have Draupadi from Mahabharata, you have Mother Sita from the Ramayana. So the insults being imposed upon the women practically have caused a fratricide and the complete annihilation of Ravana's dynasty. Ravana's dynasty was annihilated. If he was just a demon who was going to stay in Lanka and not come to the Indian subcontinent, he would have probably escaped the wrath of Lord Ram. But then he commits this offense because of his sinful propensity of taking away Mother Sita. So this is basically a violation. And he practically is drawing the wrath of Lord Ram. So the entire destruction of Ravana's line happens due to his attacking Mother Sita. The entire destruction of the Kaurava line starts with Draupadi's offense. So in both cases, the greatest epics focus on the statement of the Brahmanas, the cows, and the defenseless creatures are my own body, Krishna's body. So basically, any assault, any faculty of judgment which has been impaired, if they look upon these as distinct from me, then they are basically like furious serpents. He's basically saying they're calling death upon themselves if you were to not being able to distinguish this as my body. On the other hand, they captivate my heart, who are gladdened in the heart, and who their lotus faces enlighten by nectarian smiles, respect the Brahmanas, even though the Brahmanas utter harsh words. This is very important for us as devotees. Here, he's saying, if you respect the Brahmanas, even though the Brahmanas utter harsh words, yeah, we all have our experiences that sometimes we have experiences of even devotees uttering very harsh exchanges. Devotees, Brahmanas. So now we had Narad Muni cursing Nalakuvera and Manigriva. Yeah. You have the Kumaras cursing Jaya and Vijaya. In both cases, the recipients of the curses simply looked on and they practically did not curse back. They did not agitate. They practically submitted themselves and accepted the curse on their head. So this is a Brahminical curse. This is how they are trained to behave, because they understand that it will only be worse if they were to react this way. So this is also an example that's being given, that if someone like a Brahmana, who is basically a Brahmana, who is a Brahmana? A Brahmana is someone whose nature is Brahmanical, who is practically Brahmanical by nature, guna karma vibhagashaha, where the guna, the nature of the person, is predominated by the mode of goodness. And as a consequence, he is Brahmanical. So he is simple, he's austere. So all of these things are there. So to take on his wrath is to simply cause trouble to oneself. But if the wrath comes to you, how do you behave? You accept it and you keep quiet. You simply, keep quiet so that it doesn't become worse, which is basically the behavior in two instances of this particular circumstance. They look upon the Brahmanas as my own self and pacify them by praising them in loving words, even as a son would appease an angry father, or as I am pacifying you. These servants of mine have transgressed against you, not knowing the mind of their master. I shall therefore deem it a favor done to me if you order that, although reaping the fruit of their transgression, they may return to my presence soon, and the time of their exile from my abode may expire before long. Here, Lord Vishnu is practically petitioning the Kumaras to forgive and to shorten the sentence for Jaya and Vijaya. He's intervening on behalf of his servants. Even though they have committed an offense, he's intervening. He's practically saying, shorten the time, do something. And he's practically imploring the Kumaras not to leave the Jaya and Vijaya with the terrible curse of falling into the material sky. He wants them back because he loves them dearly. So he's chastising them, saying they have forgotten me. But he's also saying that they're keeping quiet when you are cursing them, which is good behavior. He's reminding the sages. And then he is saying, please reduce the sentence. Now he's imploring the sages. Brahma continued, even though the sages had been bitten by the serpent of anger, their souls were not satiated with hearing the Lord's lovely and illuminating speech, which was like a series of Vedic hymns. The Lord's excellent speech was difficult to comprehend because of its momentous import and its most profound significance. The sages heard it with wide open ears and pondered it as well. But although hearing, they could not understand what he intended to do. They were completely bewildered. Yeah, they were bewildered. They were bewildered by the presence of the Lord, by his countenance, his behavior, his humility. His entire presence was so overpowering that they didn't know what to do after he had spoken. The four Brahmana sages were nevertheless extremely delighted to behold him, and they experienced a thrill throughout their bodies. Then they spoke as follows to the Lord, who had revealed the multi-glories of the Supreme Personality through his internal potency, Yogamaya. I'm going to stop here, and I think this is exactly where I stopped in the previous session a few weeks back when I spoke of this chapter. But I'm going to stop here because it's a little late. I'll take a few questions, then we'll come back again to to the discussion. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavad, all glories to Prabhupada. Thank you for the long gap. We were missing your association, Prabhu, really missing your association.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Gap. The reason the question I have is about wrath, anger, and even in our own, while practicing sadhana bhakti, wrath can be detrimental. Where does this come from, and how we can combat with our own internal reaction? Of course, you mentioned that it's a mode of passion and ignorance, and better to stay away as much as possible, remain in the mode of goodness. But there is again your sanskars that you come from, and your habit that you create. How do we break away from our own internal thing of anger?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, please finish.
Yes, of anger. It's more of a personal development question.
Right. The whole process of Krishna consciousness is all about personal development. It is. In reality, who we are when we first come in touch with Krishna consciousness versus who we become in a few years is itself simply a testament that this is all about personal development. The point I want to make is that the idea of being able to understand and take on a circumstance of conflict and taking responsibility that we are responsible first for any conflict requires humility. And Shastra says that there are 5 principles of why events occur. One is that we are conditioned by the physical body. The senses could be attracted to the objects of the senses, which is the second cause. Third is the mind that has absolutely no control because it is not able to manage the senses. Fourth is the Atma. So the Atma itself has to go through some experience. So it is being put through certain experiences. It is not able to overwhelm the intelligence and the mind and to bring it in time, bring it in order. And finally, there is the Lord. In one sense, you can say that everything occurs because Krishna wills it, but in reality, he is a super soul. He is a witness. He is witnessing things. So what is the root thing? The root idea is that you always start conflicts by accepting it as our responsibility. At some level, we are responsible for a conflict. At some level. It may not be this lifetime. It is some other lifetime. We have initiated the seed of a conflict, and we are experiencing the conflict in the present. Accepting responsibility, saying that this is my issue, is in itself a big deal because it will resolve a lot of anger that's coming in from within our hearts. That's the first point, because we generally tend to be a little bit more forgiving upon ourselves when we understand that it is us who are causing this at some level. So we need to first accept that we are the cause of conflict. There's the first step. The second is to be able to literally accept the circumstance that is coming upon us, such as the circumstance of Jaya and Vijaya coming upon them. You know, they practically had a circumstance come upon them, which was life-altering for 3 lifetimes, if you want to call it. You know, going from transcendence to the mode of ignorance is a life-altering experience. Accepting it as a plan of the Lord is very important because now you're introducing Krishna into the circumstance, so it can bring in transcendence. So first we take responsibility. That requires humility. Second, we are accepting that you're basically, being put through whatever you're being put through because it's Krishna's arrangement. Both of these are starting points for resolution. This is how we start the healing process. If we can't heal this way, then we are carrying the flames of anger within us. And those flames in themselves can destroy us as much as we would want to destroy those who have perpetrated harm upon us. So how do we bring about humility? Humility is a function of Harinam. The more deeper one's chanting is, greater would be the ability to exhibit humility. When I use the word humility, I'm not literally talking about humility as in groveling on the ground and begging and falling apart every time we see someone. That's not humility. I'm referring to the ability to accept the circumstance as my own creation at some point. This allows us to cool down. Accepting that this is the Lord's arrangement is also humility, saying, Krishna, taroriva sahishnuna, trinadapi sunichena, taroriva sahishnuna. I'm tolerating the circumstances. And then trinadapi sunichena, I'm accepting it. I'm accepting it because Krishna, you created it. It is your decision. So I'm ready to go through this. So when we do this, we automatically experience something wonderful. This whole sequence of extraordinary anger displayed by Lord Narasimha occurs because there's extraordinary tolerance displayed by Prahlad. He was so simple, and he was so simple, and he was so.
I told you I was
Hare
listening
Krishna.
to something just now. What? What did you say? Yeah, we'll finish it.
Could you put yourself on mute, please? Okay, so there's extraordinary circumstance of Prahlad accepting each and everything being imposed upon him as Krishna's arrangement is basically his attachment to Harinam. Sri Prahlad was so attached to Harinam that Harinam gave him the humility to practically accept everything as Krishna's arrangement. So 2 steps practically. 1, every conflict we have contributed at some stage. It is a part of our profile. It's who we are. We have contributed. We may not recognize it as the immediate cause, but there has been some contribution in the past. There's some retribution. There is some, repercussion that's being faced now. Number 2, Krishna is ultimately responsible for everything. So we accept this as the Lord's arrangement for us to move closer to him. So this is how we start coming forth. How is it going to be possible? Only through chanting. One cannot will these things at one's command. You cannot will a certain intellectual acceptance. It is not possible. The only way one can accept all of this and act in that manner is because they are coming in touch with Krishna through Nama.
Prabhu, I was thinking about Durvasa Muni. Durvasa Muni, you mentioned, he's such a great Vaishnava sage. Sages have, they've come over all of these 3 modes of, nature. They've done tapas for so many years. How could somebody like him, who's so much this thing, get angry for this frivolous of matter and, curse people? Essentially, you're losing a lot of energy when you get angry, and you lose a lot of your potency for creation or for creativity when you get angry. I just trying to understand such an exalted person like Durvasa Muni getting angry.
He is exalted. There's a lot that has been given by him. A lot has been given by him. A lot of mantras and a lot of procedures and so on that have been rewarded. If you notice, even he was the one who gifted Mother Kunti the ability to call upon the demigods so that she could have progeny. So the Pandavas, in one sense, were facilitated by Durvasa Muni, the appearance of Pandavas. He practically gave her a solution to come out of a fix which she would never have been able to come out of, because of her husband's situation. Durvasa Muni, he represents the mode of ignorance. In other words, he practically has the ability to end things. So in one sense, if one wants to end something, you can worship and you can ask him for help. So he can practically end everything. So he carries that potency. It's reality. Just as Agastya, sage Agastya, he has the ability to facilitate the process of creation. So if you want to start something, he can help in the creative process. Durvasa Muni can end. So there are many circumstances in life that we would want to end. Yeah, there are many circumstances if we can't accept it. Sometimes there are circumstances such as, for example, the pandemic. One can say that we want to end the pandemic so that there could be free movement and people don't need to lose their energy in making all these adjustments. So there are many circumstances in material energy which require that potency. So he carries that potency. So because he carries that potency like Rudra, like Shiva, he is also very highly subject to becoming infuriated because he carries that potency. Sometimes the potency takes over those who carry them. So that's what we see with Durvasa Muni. So that is a circumstance. But we have to respect everyone who comes into the Srimad Bhagavatam, regardless of their behavior. He's a part of the Bhagavatam. He must be something. It's as simple as that.
Thank you, Guru.
Sure. Okay, I think I have something on chat, and let me just see. Yeah, this is apart from offering water on New Moon Day, anything else one can do for Pitrudosh? As I said, we don't do it. We don't offer water on New Moon Day as Vaishnavas. We feed Brahmanas. So you can basically feed Vaishnavas, Brahmanas periodically on the days of disappearance of older people in the family. And you can basically, personally, depending on where you are, you could cook a feast and invite Vaishnavas, Brahmanas, requesting them to bless the family, which is one way of doing it. The other way is for feasts to be sponsored in different temples in the dhams, where they could basically feed Krishna and then they could distribute the prasad to the Vaishnavas. That's actually very powerful. So that's what is recommended. So we don't, in the Vaishnava Siddhanta, we don't offer water on New Moon Day. That is basically, we don't deal with the Pitris, we don't deal with the demigods, we don't deal with anybody else. We deal with Krishna. As a consequence, Krishna says in the Bhagavatam that you feed me, Bhoga, and then you feed the Brahmanas, the Vaishnavas. I'm going to eat through their mouths. If they are satisfied, I'm satisfied. So that's basically what we do. And it's very powerful. It works. So we should not think that it doesn't work. It works. Please explain what Bhishma Panchak is and if there is a need for any special observance during the 5 days. Bhishma Panchak is basically the last 5 days of Kartik, depending on where you are. It's around the corner. It's between the 15th and the 20th. So the last 5 days. If you have not observed Kartik for the whole month, if you're very strict with the Bhishma Panchak, then you can overcome the defects of not observing Kartik properly by observing Kartik in these 5 days. So what is it that you can do? A lot of devotees do different things based on their capacity. Some devotees eat only once, but then offering of the lamp to Lord Damodar is a must regardless of how many times we eat. There could be an extra number of rounds. There could be service done after fasting. All of this can be done. So there isn't a particular, I would say, process that I want to offer. That I'm sure there is. Hari Bhakti Vilas has an entire chapter dedicated to Kartik. So, we have all kinds of procedures that have been chosen by Sanatana Goswami Pad. But I just want to say that we want to focus on Nam. We want to reduce and perform some austerity so we can eat maybe once a day if that's possible. If that doesn't, you don't feel comfortable doing that, then don't do it. Have twice a day. And then you offer some service at the temple, specifically go and clean, offer some menial seva. All of this is going to be extraordinarily beneficial. Is there any other question or comment?
I have one more question. When you started the class, you mentioned that in Sri Vrindavan Dham, Krishna's activities and pastimes are still happening. It's not
Yes.
happened years ago, or it is history. It's actually there as we speak now. It's happening. My question is, I serve in the temple here, and does that similar sort of, and there's a lot of offerings happening, and with the Lord is there. Does similar sort of activities happen? Because I remember Srila Prabhupada, when the installation happened, said keep a chair for Narad Muni, and we still have a chair in the temple altar for Narad Muni to come, and there's another chair as well for Shiva to come while Gaura Arati happens. So my question is, similar sort of thing, does it happen in places like London and Sri Radha Landaneshwar temple?
It depends on the potency of the place. essentially, if the potency is being maintained, the standard of worship and the devotion, then such devotion will attract those who come to us in those circumstances. Why would we want to go anywhere? If we were to take our circumstances from a practical standpoint, we would want to go to places where we have friends. We want to go to places where we find some extraordinarily special love that's waiting for us. So we want to basically interact with that particular circumstance. We are attracted to those circumstances from a practical basis. That is this case with devotees. If there is a saintly personality with very high potency, who is an eternal associate of the Lord, he has the ability to bring along with him or attract into that assembly his eternal associates. So when Srila Prabhupada used to say, all glories to the assembled devotees, there are devotees who are seen and there are devotees who are not seen. There are devotees who are not seen who come into the atmosphere because there's very high potency. So it all is a matter of potency. It's all a matter of being able to have someone there who has the ability to basically, who is being missed by others. So there's association which is being wanted in the spiritual sky. So they come to meet those who are in the world, who have come here for special service, and they are a part of the assembly. We just can't see them. They come and they attend. If the kirtan is very, very powerful, if there's great purity, if the rituals in the temple of high standard, then which means that basically it's very sincere, not just the rituals, but the internal mindset. All of this is going to attract people from different parts of the world, different parts of the universe, demigods, liberated souls, sages, and then even eternally liberated associates of the Lord. And the Lord himself, obviously. So to answer your question, it is basically subjective to how things are.
But for sure, it happens in Vrindavan.
For Vrindavan, it is the spiritual sky. There is no difference. Vrindavan is the spiritual sky. Mathura Mandal is the spiritual sky. It is non-different from Krishna's Goloka. It is non-different. It is the spiritual sky. You should consider this as a dimension that you can't really see, but a dimension that exists here. Yeah. So as a consequence, when you are here and you have the ability and the consciousness to enter the dimension, then you witness events that are occurring in the dimension. Yeah. They can be happening around you, but because you are not in the dimension, you can't see it. If you're able to enter the dimension, then you have the ability to witness events as well. So that's the point.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hare
All
Krishna,
right.
Guruji.
Hare Krishna.
Can I ask one question, Guruji?
Yes, please go ahead.
I think my question is similar to what Mataji asked. Maybe answer is similar. I just want to confirm. The Kashyap Mahasi is being great sage. So when the situation is put into by Mother Aditi, so he has to get agitated and he has to commit like whatever the meeting with her offense. So I think in our life we'll be putting into those kind of situations where we also be kind of feel like we're forced to do those situations, commit offenses. How can we avoid them? How can we overcome when we get that situations?
The first point we want to understand is we want to distinguish the two. What happens to us in our life in terms of circumstances that are inauspicious is due to our karma. With Kashyapa Muni and Diti, they are a part of Leela. What happens to us may not bring the appearance of Lord Narasimha, may not bring the appearance of Lord Varaha, you see. So what happens to us is our karma. So we should have that understanding. That is the first step. So we are bound to experience things that have the root in the past, and we are digesting that karma. There are times when that karma is very difficult to digest, and it becomes a great austerity to interact with that karmic reaction as well. But we tolerate the circumstances. We distinguish what is right and what is wrong under those circumstances, and we keep continuing to engage in devotional service. That is what we're supposed to do. So the point being, that we are put into circumstances, we tolerate them to the extent to which we can. There might be circumstances where we may not be able to tolerate. And those circumstances, we practically beg the Lord for mercy and we endeavor for devotional service. This makes us very dear to Krishna, because when we tolerate circumstances that are very difficult, we develop awareness and we develop jnana. You see, we are developing awareness, we are developing jnana. And as a consequence, we are burning the karmic reactions that we initially came in touch with in the past, which have created all of these circumstances for us. And we are burning those karmic reactions by performing the austerity of distinguishing what is duty, even though the circumstances are difficult, and then moving forward. This is what we are supposed to do. This is very pleasing to the Lord. Humbly, this is basically Trinada Pisunichena Tarori Vasaishnana. We are endeavoring with great difficulty based on circumstances that we have created from the past. We don't know what karma we did, but we have created it because there's someone who is responsible. We're going through it. We are tolerating the circumstances, and we are still endeavoring for devotional service, and we are wanting to engage ourselves in devotional service. This is very pleasing to the Lord. So this is what we are supposed to do. Does it make sense, what I just said?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So ours is a karma. I wouldn't expect. Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, can I ask you, it's similar to this Prabhu asked. I just want to add something there to ask a question.
Sure.
When the situations are not really okay, and when you're confused, you don't know what to do, it's okay to say, Lord, I don't understand this now. Please help me. Please guide me how I should proceed. Is that okay to ask help that way, Prabhu?
Yes. You mean you're asking whether you can offer prayers to Krishna that if you don't understand certain circumstances for clarification?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you could do it in many ways. You could do it via the reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, where you prayerfully approach Srimad Bhagavatam. And then you might find that after you've offered prayers of wanting a solution from Krishna on something that you can't really understand, the Bhagavatam is giving you answers. Or you might come in touch with a verse and the Bhagavad Gita is giving you answers. Or you might come in touch with a class and you might hear that exact particular word. Yeah?
Class is amazing, always. The next day, the class will clarify everything.
Exactly. So this is basically how it works. With Krishna, the super soul who is within the heart, he is hearing the question and then he is making an arrangement externally so that we could come in touch with whatever information we need so that we could move forward, come closer to him. Yes.
Yeah. And also, Prabhu, you said ask forgiveness. Forgiveness, like for which, what do you say forgiveness, Prabhu? I did not understand. You said you can't tolerate, sometimes you have to ask forgiveness. So because I'm saying, I don't know how to tolerate, how you're going to help me, I don't know whether I can go through, I'm literally asking everything from the Lord. So how will I ask forgiveness? For asking, I should ask forgiveness, Prabhu?
No, I'm not sure if I fully understood the context. I don't remember the whole sentence that I said, which you're quoting.
You just mentioned
but
when you are, sometimes you can't tolerate, then you ask for forgiveness. Not now.
Well, basically, we are basically saying we can't tolerate. We ask for forgiveness from the Lord, and we basically, request him to see that if it is his intention for him to resolve this issue so that we could move forward. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure. All right. So I think we'll stop here. I was just wanting to say, Jay, you were asking about Bhishma Panchak. I'm not sure if you wanted to know what the Bhishma Panchak fast was from a theological perspective. I just explained it from a practical perspective, which you may be aware of. This is basically the 5 days of fasting that has come about, which is in glory of Bhishma Dev, who preached and who spoke of Dharma, and he preached basically the duties and everything else, he was practically sharing and performing his duty as a Kshatriya till the very last breath. He was free to leave his body and leave at any time, even though he was in great pain. He prolonged that particular incident and that particular situation for the war of Kurukshetra to end. And then he was interacting with the Pandavas so that he could assist them in re-establishing Dharma. So in glory of Bhishma Dev, these 5 days are called the Bhishma Panchak. This is one version. So it is in glory of, as a glorification, the last 5 days of Kartik Mas is called Bhishma Panchak. But the point is that basically if you haven't fasted and if you haven't been able to observe Kartik properly, then this is an opportunity to somewhat tie it in. In general, devotees become more serious for 5 days regardless, simply because they just want to take advantage of the last 5 days to resolve issues of maybe they weren't very strict during the earlier part. All right. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. And if there are any more questions, please feel free to write to me. Thank you for joining me. Hare Krishna, and wish you a happy Bhishma Panchak. I guess by the time we meet next week, we may have been very close to the end of Kartik. So Hare Krishna, everyone.